Welcome back into the Pig Trail Show. Another Sunday means another Hog Hoops report. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Jacob Morris. And Kevin, really for the first time since April, we got to hear from Coach Cal in an extended format on Monday. He spoke with the media for over 40 minutes. A lot of interesting stuff. What were your main takeaways from hearing from the head hog on Monday?
I think one of the most interesting things is how he used summer practices, those
Yeah.
limited practices, June and July. Really didn't implement a lot of team stuff in terms of offense, defense, even out of bounds plays. That wasn't the focus at all. What they worked on was individual development. So I found that to be very interesting. There was competitive action going on in that individual development. So you had probably different sets of drills where you're challenging your players on offense, maybe to push beyond some things they're comfortable with, because he talked about learning how to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and then defensively some of the same, challenging guys in that limited drill work where you're really trying to get players better individually in their development on both sides of the ball. So the team stuff will come later. And this is not always how it's been chopped up in previous regimes in terms of working on stuff in the summer. In fact, the last coach, Eric Patrick Musselman, EPM, they went through some team stuff and put some stuff in, worked on some things when you start talking about sets. That's not the case here based on what we were told. I find it, there's more than one way to skin a cat. John Calipari's had great success, but I do find it interesting that he really wanted to get a feel for where guys were coming in terms of and then what he wants, where he wants them to be, and then how he worked on each. And he talked about each player individually as well. I think the other big takeaways are some of the individual stuff in terms of, I thought he talked more positively about these two guys, Trevor Brazil and Adu Thiero. Now, that's not to say they're the, front runners for anything coming out of limited summer practices, but it seemed like he spent more time talking about the positives of those guys, how Brazil was better than he thought he was, how Thiero has been really good. And it may have been intentional that he didn't talk as much about the two guys who will definitely come into the preseason with all the accolades. When you look at Nelly Davis, the transfer from Florida Atlantic, when you look at Jonas Adu, the transfer from Tennessee on the front line, both of those guys, big-time all-league performers a season ago, both have deep NCAA tournament run experience. Last year, Adu helping Tennessee not only win the SEC regular season, but get to the Elite Eight. A year before that, Nelly Davis at Florida Atlantic, putting that program in its first and ever, and maybe only ever, Final Four run. And so there were just a lot of interesting things I thought that came out of that. Now, the top three things he mentioned in terms of kind of encapsulating everything was, first, they want to establish and set a culture, basically the foundation, and then the individual stuff with some competitive work kind of being part of that top three things they wanted to accomplish. And he said they want to play at a certain pace where guys got to get faster. They had track coaches in there. I thought that stood out. He said they had 3 to 4 point guards, guys that could play the lead guard spot. So by my count coming into this, really only 3 stand out to me. DJ Wagner, Boogie Flynn, who will be a freshman, Wagner, the transfer from Kentucky, and then Nelly Davis, who I think is going to be in some ISO ball situations, can lead your offense. So if there's a fourth guy based on the names we thought we knew about in camp, that leaves the door open for, could it be a Carter Knox, or potentially even a Adu Thiero, who's very versatile. But I think Thiero and Brazil, two of the fact that those were the two most talked about players, I wrote a recent article where I think they're probably going to be maybe wild cards for Calipari, simply because they've got all the promise in the world. They've had first-round NBA mock draft projections, but neither player's been an all-league performer when the dust settles after a season. Last year, Brazil first-team All-SEC preseason. So a lot still to prove, but a lot of versatility they bring to that 3-4 in terms of Thiero, 4-5 in terms of Brazil. They may be the most important pieces on that front line, which only goes 4 deep in terms of matchup versatility, and then being good enough to play multiple positions. Thiero can defend multiple positions. Let's see how much better Brazil's getting in terms of playing through contact and being a more physical presence, playing with force. That's something he needed to work on. I think we'll see less three-point shooting from him moving forward based on what Calipari said. And I think Thiero may only be scratching the surface about how good he can be. I think they want to see him not only improve his three-point shooting percentages, but that would allow him to take more in volume from three moving forward.
Yeah, and I think both those guys are really interesting that he focused there because I remember when this team started to come together a little bit. One of the things we talked about was both Brazil and Thiero in terms of defensive versatility and what they can do for this team, right? We know Brazil can stretch the floor. We know what both of them can potentially do on offense, but the identity of this team being potentially one that can get after teams defensively, both those guys would play a big role. And I think, at least for me, and I think for a lot of Arkansas fans, it was kind of music to their ears, right, to hear the shift in mentality for Brazil, because there had been a lot of complaints at times, right, where Cal just said straight up, he said, I don't want him sitting in the corner and shooting threes anymore. And that was at times the role that he was resigned to a year ago. He called it being an attack dog, and it should be interesting to see Brazil in that form because we know he can shoot the ball. He's flashed the athleticism, but if Coach Cal can get him moving downhill, it should bring a lot of offensive versatility to the team as well.
Yeah, if you look at Brazil, 35 games spanning 2 seasons at Arkansas. The injuries obviously played into that. He had 6 double-doubles in that span. That's better than 1 double-double every 6 games. And when I see a guy getting double-doubles, what's he doing? He's hitting the glass. He may not be the best mano-a-mano defender, but he's a good weak side shot blocker, rim protector. That's why I think he can help at the 5. And if he can be more consistent with his rebounding game, he's helping a team close out defensive possessions with rebounds. That's important. You don't want to give up second chances. So sometimes we talk defense, we focus on lockdown. Do you always stay in front of your man? Can you play with physicality? Brazil's a guy that can check multiple boxes. Thiero comes into this, to me, a guy that's already versatile defensively, can guard. I think he can defend 5 positions. Probably 3 of those really well, 2 of them for stretches, the 5 spot and the 4 spot. But man, both of those guys to me again, and we're not talking nearly enough about Nelly Davis.
Yeah.
Jonas Adu. I think it's because they weren't talked about as much by Calipari. I think that's by design. I think those are your 2 centerpieces coming into this. The only thing that was concerning to me when he talked about individual players was DJ Wagner, simply because he didn't say a lot. He said, we know he can be as good as anybody, but we're keeping an eye on that ankle. Look, I mean, that's a year removed, or not a full year because basketball season ran through March. But he was dealing with that ankle problem, that high ankle issue at Kentucky last year. It affected his efficiency. It did probably affect his production some. But if they're still talking about that now, that makes me wonder: have they kind of put are they looking for him to make a full recovery? Is he not quite there yet? Was he able to be full go? And whatever they were doing in June and July, that was not talked about. But anytime a coach brings up injury again and you're moving into the next season, not to say that there's a problem there, but to bring it up at all tells me that it may not be 100% resolved.
Yeah, should be something interesting to monitor. On the topic of point guards, on the topic of the new look Razorbacks, Casimir Chavis, another commit that Arkansas got, he signed this week with the Razorbacks, formerly committed to Washington, flips to Arkansas, and they get him into the fold, and it's just another body as Cal builds this roster that kind of helps the 2024 looking Razorbacks kind of come into shape here.
Well, this is the interesting thing, hindsight. That press conference was on Monday.
Yeah.
And Calipari did not talk about this player, and he cannot comment on a committed player. They have to be certified. The signature, whether it's a letter of intent, a financial aid agreement, whatever it is, has to be certified by the NCAA first. That didn't happen. Not only did his name not come up, I asked the SID for basketball, Mike Haywood, after the press conference, do you have an update on this young man? Because I know he publicly committed, but the university hasn't formally released the official thing, which I know is what matters and is the key for Calipari even commenting on him. And all I got was a shoulder shrug with that facial question mark. So I got that on Monday after the press conference was actually over, as we were milling around still in the media room. All right, fast forward a couple of days later, Arkansas men's basketball publishes the roster numbers, the jersey numbers with players' names and their numbers. Chavis was nowhere on that. 13 other players plus Lawson Blake, who's going to be out injured, but even his number was flashed. So you had 14 names, no Chavis to be found. And so finally, late Friday afternoon, after business hours, I think right after 5 o'clock p.m. Central Time, the official announcement came out from the University of Arkansas. So here's another player in the fold that we didn't hear anything about in that press conference. But also, Jacob, when Calipari in the press conference was talking about 3 or 4 point guards. That's what Chavis is. He's a 6'3" point guard in Minneapolis. You can call him a combo guard. But he had really nice assist numbers, a good scorer, a top 150 rated guy. A lot of high majors wanted him. You mentioned he originally signed with Washington. Was Calipari referencing him when he said 3 or 4? Now we circle back to that. Maybe he was.
Yeah.
But what I do know is this player has not gone through any summer stuff unless the U of A intentionally withheld this signing till Friday and had it for a while where he could be practicing. I doubt that's the case, simply because when they put out the jersey numbers middle of the week, his name wasn't even present there. So this tells me this finally got completed in terms of him being green light go, which means he'll join the team then when they come back from their brief summer break. When fall semester starts, he'll be getting back in. They'll be doing limited practices for a while. Then it ramps up to the full bore stuff as you get ready for the season. We know football season's on the doorstep, but basketball, we could talk about that 365 days a year. Throw another day in there on a leap year, and we're good.
Absolutely. Hey, we're only 3 months out now. It seems like a far cry from, seems like, snap your fingers, and we were just getting the Cal news, and you were wondering if we were going to get any video on the Arkansas social media, and now we're 3 months out. It's coming quick. But let's talk some recruiting. John Calipari, that's his forte, always active there, and give us an update of where things stand for Arkansas with a couple 25 and 26 guys.
Well, first of all, last weekend, we know Arkansas locked up, got the commitment from national top 5 rated 5-star Darius Acuff Jr., 6'3" point guard, Detroit, IMG Academy, Team USA U18 gold medal this summer. I think he was the MVP of that run. So we know about that. The first 5 top 10 rated 5-star off the board for anybody. But you want to build momentum off of that. During the midweek, we learned that A.J. DeBonce, actually, I guess it was Friday, so end of the week, if I'm not getting my days mixed up, A.J. DeBonce, the number 1 player in the country in 2025, 6'9" combo forward, played at Prolific Prep a year ago. He'll be at Utah Prep for a senior season. It was really thought Arkansas would be among the top 3 or 4 schools for his in pursuit of him. Did not have Arkansas on his list of 7. Arkansas was not there. Now, he's a guy that's projected to drag this out through the spring. So there's time for this to change. We all the time see these players put out lists, and even later they'll say they're reopening their recruitment and kind of scratch a bunch of teams off the list. I'm not saying that'll happen here, but if it's true that he's going to drag this through the spring and take his time, this is something that can change. But for now, it looks like Arkansas is out. It may not change. That's that. So the number 1 player, the top 5-star in the country in a loaded 2025 class. But fear not, Arkansas is in the mix, heavy mix for some other top 10 rated 5-stars. Actually, 2 more rated in the top 5. Darius Acuff Jr., top 5. How about Caleb Wilson, 6'9" combo forward out of Atlanta, another top 5 rated 5-star. Arkansas is in the mix there. He's told me he wants to visit in the fall. Arkansas made his final 12, by the way. So that seems like a lot of teams, but as expected, Arkansas is in the mix. He's also been talking with Darius Acuff Jr. about playing together at the next level in college. So keep an eye on that. I think Arkansas just might be the leader for him right now. It's a long way to go, a lot of visits, anything can happen. He's a guy I think gets it done, though, in time to sign early in November. That's my thought on that. But Koa Pete, 6'8" forward out west. When you start talking about from Gilbert, Arizona, played on the Adidas 3SSB circuit, probably the top player over there this spring and summer, a guy that Arkansas and Calipari been on for a long time. Again, top 5 ranked 5-star in that 2025 class. I think based on my sources, Arkansas at minimum is going to get a visit. I think Arkansas's probably in his top 3 right now, if I had to say that. And then you've got to, if you're John Calipari and you're in the top 3 at any point in time, you got to like the chances. Plenty of other 5-stars. Jasper Johnson, top 10 rated out of the state of Kentucky. He'll be at Overtime Elite. Has Arkansas in his final 5. There's a host of others. We know the Boozer twins. A lot of people think it's between Miami, where they play at Miami, Columbus, Cameron and Caden, or Duke. But another duo that talks about Arkansas when they talk about the top 5 teams in terms of who's recruiting them the hardest. You always hear those Arkansas come up in that conversation for the Boozer twins. So keep an eye on all of this and just buckle up, man. If you think Arkansas gets a 5-star, you think, well, that's time to close up shop on the 5-stars. Not anymore, man. And I know Eric Patrick Melsman 3 recruiting cycles ago, 2022, got 3 one-and-done 5-stars. However, you might see class after class after class where that's kind of the talking point because it's always been that way with John Calipari. Why would that be different now? He said it in the press conference. Speaking of that Monday presser, all we did was move the headquarters.
Yeah,
they have a different philosophy. They're not going to grab 6 or 7 necessarily, trying to whittle it down to 3 or 4. But in terms of the process and the formula to get those kind of players to commit to you, all they did was move the headquarters. So keep an eye on it.
Yeah, it's so interesting from the standpoint that, you just talked about a couple of guys, right? And, they're priority targets for Arkansas. And, you won a couple minutes on multiple different guys, and you didn't even get outside the top 10 of that class, right? These are all realistic targets for Arkansas. It's wild. And you bring up a good point because it was interesting hearing about his recruiting philosophy. And somebody asked him, it was natural, hey, what have you changed since getting to Arkansas? And he just said, we're in Arkansas. Their pitch stays the same. If we present what we've done for recruits and for players, getting them to the next level, nobody's going to even touch us. And he was just blatant, straightforward about that, and he's not lying. It's a pretty good pitch. Why change it?
Yeah, he's not one of those hype men where he's got to hype himself up. He's been there and done that. I mean, he's the best to ever do it. Why change that? And, when you listen to him, I feel like I'm being recruited as a media member. I'm sitting up in the front row. I'm nodding just about everything he does because I'm vibing with it. I get it. This guy still has energy. I think he's got gas left in the tank. I don't know what's going to happen. People have been knocking him for not doing well in the NCAA tournament the last 5 years. If you look, even when he had things going, Final Fours, Elite Eights, championship games, they're knocking him for not winning enough titles. I think he made a joke in the press conference. All right, we won 1 title, maybe should have won 9. Let's just get that out there. He said something like that. Yeah, so I mean, he understands who he is, and I would not put it past him to have another Final Four run in him. And now he's the Arkansas Razorbacks coach. If Arkansas gets back to the Final Four under John Calipari, he's the third Naismith Hall of Fame coach at Arkansas, and it would be the third coach to take Arkansas to a Final Four if that were to happen. So I still think that's a strong possibility. I don't know about this first roster. I do think it should come into the preseason. My opinion, of course, ranked somewhere in that 10 to 15 national rankings, and then projected in a 16-team SEC now, somewhere in the top 3 to 4. Anything outside of 5 would really surprise me, but my personal take would be top 3 or 4 there in the league, and again, top 10 to 15 nationally.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I like how you described you felt like you were being recruited in the front row, right? Because he knows how to play a room, right? It was the press conference wrapped up. I thought it was funny. And, the SID was trying to get him out of there. And he stopped and he went around the room. Said, anybody else have any more questions for me? He knows how to play the room well. It's it's how he gets it done. And I mean, it makes sense why he's so successful in the recruiting trail as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The SID, I mentioned Kaywood's name.
Yeah.
He told Bob Holt, you get here, Bob, final question. And Calipari's looking right at me. He pointed to me, I guess maybe off camera, I don't know, but he gave me the look like, I'll get you.
Yeah.
And then he asked
me in the back of the room too.
And I think you jumped in there.
He got me back there too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Anything else you want to hit before we go, Kevin?
Not really, other than I am a proud American. I've been watching the Team USA rack up gold over this weekend. It may be the busiest weekend in terms of gold medals in the sports I really like, swimming, track and field now underway. But Team USA, I think, is at least tied with China right now in total gold, blowing out the total medal count.
Yeah.
But to see Team USA getting golds in so many different sports, it's what we're used to. But it's always fun to see it happen live.
Yeah.
And, we only get the Olympics every 4 years. I guess we got Olympics in back-to-back or a 3-year gap only because of COVID back in 2020. But, sometimes you get to watch sports you don't normally tune into, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, especially with track and field too, with all the Razorbacks, where I read, I believe it is 31 Arkansas affiliated athletes alone in track and field. I mean, you got a lot of different ones to cheer from, a lot of Americans as well, a couple, for other countries too. You got Team Arkansas. It's essentially an entire country over there as well, competing for track and field.
It's really cool because when you watch, like, I'm a junkie, so I'm watching all the heats and the different things, and you hear Arkansas being mentioned when they're talking about the top 2 or 3 runners in each of these different or whatever the event is. And so you're like, okay, that can only help marketing.
Yeah.
John Calipari, I think, helps marketing beyond the basketball team.
Yeah.
But I think these kind of things, anytime Arkansas is mentioned, it's a lot. So Razorback fans got a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, should be a fun couple of weeks coming up. That's going to do it for this week's Hog Hoops Report. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Jacob Morris. More Pig Trail Show coming up after the break.